Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're diving into Kong, Survivor Instinct, a 2.5D platformer that recently crashed onto the gaming scene. Now, it's been a while since I took on a side-scroller, so this was already feeling a bit retro and exciting. I mean, who wouldn't want to see Kong battling it out in the background while you run around in the chaos below? But the big question for us low-spec gamers is, can it actually run on a low-end PC with no dedicated graphics card? That's what we're here to find out. So, I downloaded it, set the resolution to 720p, and turned down every setting possible. I thought, hey, maybe I'll squeeze out a smooth 40 FPS, but, well, let's just say Kong isn't exactly a breeze to run. Stick around as we dive into the game's performance, gameplay, and a full review of this unique, but challenging, side-scroller experience. Alright, so let's really dive into the performance here because, honestly, it was quite the experience. Not exactly a smooth one either. On my trusty low-end laptop, I went in with a ton of optimism. I mean, come on, this isn't a high-octane AAA game. So I thought, surely, I can pull off a playable frame rate if I crank everything down, right? So, down went the settings. Resolution locked at 720p, low textures, shadows practically non-existent. I even made the grass in the game look like it was straight out of an old cartoon, but despite my best efforts, the game was like, nope, nice try, and gave me a humble 20 FPS. Yep, 20 FPS. It felt like Kong himself was moving through molasses, like some epic, but unintentional, slow-motion cutscene. I've put my laptop through a lot, testing all kinds of AAA titles, turning it into a virtual sweatshop of gaming trials. But I honestly thought that Kong, Survivor Instinct, would be kind to my system, especially with the graphics being somewhat basic. However, the game's optimization isn't doing it any favors, and I couldn't help but wonder if the developers snuck in some heavy Kong-sized assets behind the scenes that my laptop was quietly struggling to lift. You know how some games run like a charm after you tone down the visuals? Not this one. Despite reducing everything possible, I was watching Kong and David Martin, the main character, run at a pace that made me wonder if they needed a serious caffeine boost. Imagine a tense chase scene, and instead of sprinting for survival, it looks more like a casual afternoon jog because of the frame rate. Not to mention, the animations occasionally stutter, which didn't exactly help me feel immersed in the game's supposedly intense atmosphere. It was like playing an accidental remake of The Matrix's bullet time in all the wrong places. If you're brave enough to try this on a low-spec machine, here's my honest advice. It's technically playable, but you'll need the patience of a saint. I'd love to see the developers work on optimizing the game a bit more. I mean, who doesn't want to experience Kong's mighty battles without wondering if their computer might just give up on life? Right now, the game's Survivor Instinct to run on low-end systems is about as strong as a toddler's grip on a Kong-sized banana. Now, let's get into the gameplay because this is where Kong, Survivor Instinct, starts off strong but, unfortunately, loses steam pretty quickly. Right off the bat, you're dropped into a gritty, crumbling coastal city where Kong and other massive kaiju are brawling in the background. You play as David Martin, a single dad on a wild mission to find his missing daughter amidst the chaos. Just a typical Tuesday in Kaiju Land, right? The premise is fresh and immediately intriguing. A side-scrolling Metroidvania adventure that throws you into a world where gigantic monsters battle it out while you, the little guy, try to survive below. But, sadly, the game doesn't quite live up to the epic expectations it sets. The story itself feels like it's barely holding things together. David's search for his daughter is more like a convenient reason to move from one end of the map to the other. There's not much depth, no real emotional hook, and honestly, it starts feeling like you're moving from one checkpoint to the next without much motivation. The characters, too, are fairly one-dimensional. David's character doesn't really evolve. and we don't get any compelling backstory or emotional scenes that make his journey feel personal or urgent. It's almost as if the story was sketched out on the back of a napkin, enough to justify the action but lacking any real substance. Let's talk about the gameplay mechanics. After the first 30 minutes or so, you've pretty much seen what the game has to offer. The environmental puzzles are, well, basic. Most of them revolve around moving from one electric puzzle to the next, flipping switches, moving boxes, and occasionally finding a lever or button. While these tasks are okay for the first few levels, they quickly become repetitive. There's no variation or added complexity as you progress. Instead of the genre's usual twists and inventive puzzles, you get stuck with a predictable formula that doesn't add much thrill or creativity. I often found myself just going through the motions, hoping for some unique twist that never came. The combat, sadly, isn't much better. Picture trying to fight with controls that feel about as responsive as an old pair of flip phones. There's a frustrating lack of smoothness, and the mechanics feel clunky and unrefined, making each encounter feel like a chore rather than a thrill. Not only that, but the variety of enemies is, well, non-existent. You'll encounter the same baddies over and over, just with slightly different placements. Fighting them feels like swatting at flies, repetitive and not exactly fulfilling. And when you do land a hit, the feedback is minimal, so you don't get that satisfying oomph that makes combat rewarding in other games. There are a few high points, though, where the game's design really shines. Occasionally, you'll find yourself in an intense chase scene, sprinting to escape from titans, which brings to mind some of the epic, high-stakes sequences from games like Ori and the Will of the Wisps. But these moments are rare, and they're over way too quickly, leaving you wishing for more of that high-energy action. Instead, you're often left trudging through long stretches of drudgery, making your way from one mundane puzzle to the next. If you ever get lost in this game, which happens more than it should, it's because the level design can be a bit of a maze. Unfortunately, this isn't due to Metroidvania-style exploration, where you need to backtrack because you've unlocked a new ability or found a key item. No, it's more like getting lost because the layout is confusing, with no real hints on where to go next or why. It's easy to feel like you're stuck in a loop, wandering around without much purpose. Now, here's where I'll give the game a bit of praise. The visuals are surprisingly decent, even if the rest of the gameplay doesn't quite live up to expectations. The background environments, with massive titans battling it out, do add a sense of scale and drama. Every now and then, you catch yourself just admiring the chaos unfolding around you, and in those rare moments, the game feels almost cinematic. But unfortunately, these flashes of beauty and epicness don't last. They're buried beneath a layer of tedious gameplay that just doesn't do justice to the platformer genre or the potential of a Kong-themed game. So, where does that leave us? Kong, Survivor Instinct has potential, with an interesting premise and some great visuals, but the gameplay doesn't quite deliver. It's like ordering a 3-course meal and only getting an appetizer. Sure, it's fun to watch the titans go wild in the background, and for a moment, it might even feel epic. But between the lackluster combat, basic puzzles, and limited story, the game doesn't really do justice to the platformer genre. And on a low-end PC, it's tough to recommend, especially with that choppy frame rate dragging things down. So, there you have it. Kong, Survivor Instinct is a cool idea with some flaws, and unfortunately, it doesn't quite hit the mark for low-end PC players. If you're a hardcore Kong fan, maybe you'll enjoy it for the visuals alone, but be prepared for some slogging in between those rare, epic moments. Let me know in the comments if you've tried the game, or if there's another low-spec friendly game you'd recommend. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more low-end PC game reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.